Moderating. Great. I'll be moderating our session tonight. Before we begin, I would like to encourage everyone to become a member of Georgia TESOL if you're not. Georgia TESOL's purpose is to encourage professional development at all levels, work to improve programs across the state that increases opportunities for our multilingual learners, and to promote understanding of the cultures of our multilingual learners. So check out our website and join if you're not a member. We have a few new features of our professional learning series for 2024. Our theme is disciplinary language and literacy communities of practice. Our theme is divided into 4 strands: teaching and learning, administration, adult education and community engagement, and higher education and research. We offer professional learning twice a month, addressing one of these 4 strands. At the bottom of each session write-up, you'll see over here, it gives the name of the strand that the session is addressing. So it will help you decide whether this is going to be relevant to you and your work. We also host 2 socials a year at different locations across the state. So we would really love for you to join us. One's in May and the other's in December this year. As we welcome Dr. Webb, use the chat box for questions that you may have. I'll be monitoring it. Now for our speaker, Dr. Webb is the immediate past president of Georgia TESOL, having served as president in 2022 and 2023. She's the director of ESOL and Title III for Cobb County Schools. Dr. Webb has been engaged in implementing policies and programs that benefit multilingual learners in Georgia at the state and district level since 2005. So welcome, Dr. Webb.
Thank you so much, Donna. And I will share my screen here so we can jump in and get started. Let's see here, share screen. I think I know most of you guys, but are my slides showing up now?
Yes, they are.
Okay, perfect. I think I know most of you guys now, but just want to make sure that I do have context. I see 2 folks from the Georgia Department of Education here, but I'd love to know where the rest of you are. I know Susan Mann is in high school over at Rome City, so I know that she and I know each other. And Donna's in Columbia County, also K-12, but in the elementary context. But I'd love to know what context you're in and where you work in the TESOL universe, so I can kind of know a little bit about how to pitch my remarks today. So if you would just let me know that, and if you're sitting at your computer, I know some of you are cooking dinner and others of you are at karate practice, so you know it's the way it is. But if you're able to post in the chat, that would be great. And I'll give you just a couple of seconds to do that.
Hi, Dr. Webb. We have Alabama State Department of Education with us tonight.
Oh, wow,
Hall
welcome.
County, yes, in Hall County Middle School, Liberty County.
Now, who's from Alabama State Department of Education? I welcome you. Welcome so much. We're so excited to have Alabama in the room.
We have Christina Thurman.
Who is that?
Christina Thurman.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited. Well, I'm glad to know that you guys are all here, and I'm just excited to share with you this afternoon. Now let's just kind of dive in, because I wrote this really short, but I thought it was short and pithy, but then I suddenly realized this is going to be hard to do all this in an hour. So let's get started and dive in, because we want to plan now for EL student success next year. And let's see here why this is not. It's always hard when you're on Zoom and also trying to be on your, yes, there we go. Here we go. Now the slideshow will advance. Perfect. All right. So hopefully you guys can see my slides a little better than I can see them right now, because I have to keep moving the pictures around. But there is the title of our presentation for today. We are going to be talking about planning for success next year, because right now we're testing on access, and this year is a lot of our success will be determined by how they do on Access, and then of course how they do in April on Georgia Milestones and how they get on their grades and everything else. So a lot of this year we've already made the plans and implemented the plans, and we are currently getting to the point of assessing the plan. So we've got to start planning now, though, for success next year. Otherwise, we won't be positioned to do anything differently next year than we did this year. Donna, are my slides showing up okay? Because they're not showing up completely on my slide right
Yes,
now.
they are. Yes.
Perfect, good. Then I'll just say this really quickly, just sharing with you a little bit about Cobb County. The Cobb County School District has, certain priorities that we are pretty deeply dedicated to. And those priorities are, it's not liking me, it's not liking my, there we go. Ensuring that Cobb is the best place to teach, lead, and learn, which we try to do by increasing the effectiveness of instruction for our multilingual learners. We're trying to simplify our foundation for teaching and learning to prepare for doing things differently and better, to prepare for innovation. And that means we're trying to help our leaders and our teachers focus on what they need to focus on. Teachers focusing on teaching, on instruction, on learners, and leaders focusing on supporting those teachers with effective planning and resources. So that's where we are. And then we want to use data to make decisions, and we want to provide, to help our leaders and our teachers do that, we want to provide context for our data. We want to provide data in digestible format when we can, and also guidance to help our school leaders and teachers understand multilingual learner needs. Well, see, that said, it's January. Oh my gosh, it's January. Who has time to plan? It's cold, it's rainy, there are gray skies, there's flu, there's COVID, and access testing. So there's a lot going on. But that said, we just have to take the time to plan. So our learning targets for today, and note over there that our learning targets are here on a screen with a picture from curling. And I chose curling instead of like archery, because archery is always just like, those pictures just always like you hit the target in the middle every time. And that's just not the way it is. We're always just trying to get closer and closer, and we're trying to finesse it and figure out how. So I thought that the curling metaphor was better and more apropos for our work than, the archery, because it takes time. Language develops over time. Kids' academic achievement and their background knowledge and their vocabulary develop over time. And we have got part of our mission as language advocates, as EL advocates, multilingual learner advocates, has got to be for people to take a breath and not focus so much on standardized test data at the end of the year that they don't look at all the other indicators of EL's growth. So today we're going to talk about how we recognize and support quality instruction for multilingual learners, how we understand what ESOL delivery models are and how they can support quality instruction for MLs. I will be talking about the Georgia take on delivery models, but I think it translates into, an equivalent in most other places. And also know what data we can use to identify areas of strength and area for improvement. So that's where we're going to go. So first of all, what does quality instruction for multilingual learners look like? Well, there's a million different ways that people could answer this question, but I'm always about trying to figure out how to answer it in a way that gives you a good, complete picture where you can actually walk around the school and say, am I seeing this or am I not seeing this? So here's something that I have put together based on just years and years of doing this work. So what does it look like? Well, first of all, in a classroom that provides quality instruction for multilingual learners, oral language, listening and speaking is developed through scaffolded, language-rich, thematic instruction. It's not just random text thrown at them on random topics. There's some themes to it. It's building on their background knowledge. And you're integrating fiction and informational text because they have to learn how to understand both kinds of text and differentiate between them. So I always start with that because language is invisible to so many educators, and so many people don't understand that oral language is the foundation for literacy. I am really encouraged that the modules on the science of reading that the Georgia DOE is going to require all K-3 teachers to do are starting out with 4 hours focused on oral language as the foundation for literacy. So please keep that in mind, because that's sort of permeates my talk tonight. The other thing I think that we've got to see those key language uses being embedded in instruction. And that means we need to make our content teachers aware of the key language uses. And of course, we need to do that in all WIDA states as we're implementing the 2020 WIDA English Language Development Standards. And you'll notice at the end of these little checks, it always says every day, every day, every day, every day. I have this thing about ELs or MLs. Now we're talking about MLs and not ELs, but MLs are MLs all day, every day. And that is a point we miss quite often when we're just like, oh, go over here, have your time with the ESOL teacher and come back to my class and then just sit there and do the best you can. No, every bit of instruction needs to be differentiated to engage them. That's a high bar. We're not there. I don't know any school that's there, but we have got to start taking seriously that we need to get there. Speaking, reading, writing, and listening in every class every day. You know, there was a conversation today that somebody said, oh, so-and-so has just got this big listening program going and they're just, reading program going and they're doing da-da-da-da-da. And I would just always worry, a little bit of my antenna go up like this when I'm like, why are we teaching skills in isolation? Oral language is the foundation for literacy. You've got to have background knowledge. You've got to talk. You've got to listen. You've got to speak. You've got to write. It's all part of it. And literacy is more than just reading. It's reading and writing. We're visually supporting our instruction. And you can see the different ways you can be doing that on the screen. I think it's really important that we help people understand that visually supporting instruction can help speed up EL's develop of conceptual understanding and also vocabulary, but it also can be, they can go straight to content in their home language and then attach the English vocabulary to it. And that's something especially important for kids who are entering in late elementary, middle, or high, because they've got to be able to acquire content before they really have that proficiency in English at that high level. We got to value their home language and actively leverage them on a regular basis, again, ideally every day. So we've got to use those home languages and provide them with the ability and the knowledge of how they can actively use their home language to access data and information on topics that they're learning about. And we can help them with that. And then we need to explicitly teach vocabulary and contents with visual supports again and realia. So here's a possibility, and we are going to share this presentation with you guys after the fact when we send the recording link. But you are welcome to take any or all of this, but I really suggest that everybody make your own learning walk form. And if your schools are like our schools in Cobb, if you put it on your phone and you try to do it on your phone, you'll be in a dead zone and you won't be able to do it. So I just take little scraps of paper and I just click off what I'm seeing and make a few little notes. I like to leave, positive comments about the good things I'm seeing in the schools when I go and do learning walks. And then I can go back, and when I've got my computer, I can put the information in and I can say, what did I see? What didn't I see? And we have a form that's got a little bit more to it than this, but the first thing to do is start to go out there and say, what am I seeing? And really developing an awareness of what excellent instruction for multilingual learners looks like. And some of you guys probably have forms like this that are better. Let me take a pause right there. Take a pause and a breath. Would any of you guys like to comment or share something similar that y'all are doing in your districts or your contexts? Are we good? No, not right now. Well, if you want to comment in the chat, you absolutely can. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into delivery models. One thing I find happening in many, many schools is that folks use one delivery model. To me, that's like driving a Jaguar to go camping. It's not that you may or may not have the right delivery model for the kids' needs. You may get that Jaguar stuck on that rough trail because you are going to try to go over some rocks and you're going to bottom out. So I really always want to talk to people about delivery models and what delivery models are. So I'll start with dual language immersion. When students are taught in a dual language immersion program, if their home language matches the target language, then they are getting language and literacy in their home language and in English. And since one of the best research findings in research on multilingual learners over the many years is that it's incredibly advantageous to teach them to read in their home language first, but we can't do that. Dual language immersion is the closest that we get. It's a wonderful way to support ELs, but if you guys are like us, in Cobb, we only have certain programs, certain schools that have dual language immersion, and in those schools, it's not the full school, it's only a portion of the school. So dual language immersion, of course, has challenges because we have a shortage of teachers and it is challenging to implement it. But it is a wonderful, wonderful way to support MLs, sorry. The other thing I want to just make sure that everybody underscores here is that dual language immersion, when you come in and your language and literacy, it's actively leveraging that home language and really doing that all the time. Again, that's not something we can do fully in a class with a monolingual teacher, but there are strategies that monolingual teachers can use to leveraging the home language, such as, writing in both languages, for example. Other delivery models. So these are, again, Georgia delivery models, but there's pull-out instruction and there's collaborative push-in. Pull-out is when students are pulled out of the regular classroom and for the purpose of receiving small group instruction from the ESOL teacher. It should be English language development instruction, that language-rich oral language and literacy instruction that will allow them to develop the language and literacy skills they need. And I'm going to say a word here. I find so many schools are so afraid that that ELs will miss something out of the regular classroom that they don't want them ever pulled out. And I understand that. But if students arrive in second or let's say third or grade or higher, they completely missed the K2 literacy window. If they arrive in second grade, they've missed 2 years of the 3-year literacy window. If they arrive in second grade, they've missed the first year. And even if they arrive in kindergarten, some of those kids may need some explicit instruction over and above what's in the regular classroom. So I think we have got to, with what we're learning right now about science of reading, about the need for that explicit, cumulative, diagnostic instruction that really develops oral language and literacy. If you are not going to pull those students out, who and where in your day are they who's going to teach them how to speak and read in English, and when, and write and listen? It's all of that. So that's something that I really want people to think about, because I think that a lot of kids who are struggling in middle school now, who may have entered in upper elementary, who didn't exit and are now struggling, may never have gotten as the solid language and literacy skills that they need because they never had any dedicated literacy and language time. Collaborative push-in is a great model, but there are two things that are a challenge with it. One, you're using 2 teachers to teach students in one segment. That's an expensive model by the definition of 2 teachers to teach in one segment. And then secondly, in Georgia at least, it's extremely challenging to get the planning time. You've got to put co-planning time and structures to support co-planning in place somehow. And there need to be expectations around that. There's a bazillion books out there, most notably by Maria Dove and Andrea Honigsfeld. But if you are a school administrator or a district leader, think about what processes and what expectations need to be in place to support a truly equal collaborative partnership between the content teacher and the ESOL teacher or the language educator. And also, how can we implement some kind of some expectations for collaborative planning? We are trying to get our ESOL teachers in Cobb integrated into our Cobb collaborative community planning at least once a week with their teams that they support. It's very challenging, but we're working on it. In Cobb, we have a model we call the Intensive English Language Program. This is just an ESOL class. It's a scheduled ESOL class, but it's a class specifically for newcomers and made up only of students who are level 1. And it is very intense and lasts 2 semesters. And then we also have just regular scheduled ESOL classes for students who are at level 2, 3. Typically, if a student is at level 3 or higher in the middle or high school, at that point, especially at high school, it's hard to find time for the scheduled ESOL class. And a lot of times their needs are going to be met differently. They're going to be met through sheltered content. And sheltered content, of course, is where you have a content class that's composed. And it doesn't have to be only ELs. You can shelter content in ESOL in content classes without it being a sheltered content class. But sheltered content in Georgia, as defined for FTE purposes, is only ELs in the class, and they receive language and content instruction from the content teacher, who is and who has ESOL professional qualifications. And then in Cobb and in many other districts in Georgia, we use flexibility to innovate, do an innovative model, reduce class size, and that is where we have the content teacher who has the ESOL endorsement, who is supporting ELs and non-ELs. And here's where the wheels can come off the bus, because if you use this delivery model for all kids, including your newcomers, you are in my opinion, making a poor choice of vehicle to meet the needs of your students, because this is a model that puts a large burden on the teacher. So we call it innovative model reduce class size, because we recommend to our principals in Cobb that they reduce the class size down to take some of the planning burden off of this teacher, because she has ELs and non-ELs, or they have ELs and non-ELs in the class, have to differentiate for both, scaffold for the ELs, and meet their needs. It's a big planning challenge. And if the class sizes are huge and the teachers are not very skilled, then it can be a big, big problem. We recommend this only for our higher proficiency ELs. So this is where I'm going to take a second, and I am going to see if I can do a new share. And I'm going to go over here. And if I can, where is it? Let me stop for a second. Let me find it. I want to share our delivery model guidance that we have in Cobb right quick. Let me pause this share or stop share. And then there it is. And now let me share again.
Elizabeth, we do have a question.
Sure.
What is considered a reduced class size for Cobb County?
I try to recommend that folks reduce by class size. If that is a hard question to answer, because it does depend on the context of a school. If you are in a high school and all of your biology classes are sitting at 35, you can't reasonably reduce the class size for an innovative model as much as I would love, which I would love to get it down to, what we used to have, around 15 or 20, but you can't really legitimately probably do that. But I would say we should try to reduce by around 15 to 20% if we possibly can.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Can y'all see my document? I know this is small, but I know you're
Yes.
also, but this will be sent to you guys. We do provide our delivery model guidance to our schools, and our schools, have to take this and see how it fits their context. They always have the ability to decide, but we have our delivery model guidance organized by grade level and proficiency level. So for example, for K1, we really recommend dual language immersion or innovative reduced size class model or collaborative push-in, because this is where the language needs and the curriculum have the closest match. We don't like to fragment the day for the K-1 teachers, students. So if we have kindergarten and first grade teachers who are ESOL endorsed, we strongly recommend that we try to meet their needs in that already language and literacy rich environment. We love dual language immersion when it's available. And collaborative push-in, we love collaborative push-in. Again, it's expensive because you have 2 teachers in every segment. And it also pulls those ESOL teachers away from meeting the needs of newcomers at upper grade levels sometimes. So you have to be careful, because if all of your ESOL teachers are doing kindergarten, where you have, in first grade, where you have the largest number of ELs, sometimes you're basically shooting yourself in the foot strategically, because if you have older newcomers who have more intensive needs, you haven't got somebody who can pull those small groups and do that really high quality English language development, literacy, language and literacy rich instruction for them. So I'm not going to be able to go through this in great depth, but this is kind of the thinking that is imbued in this document. So K1, this is our recommendation. We get up to second grade. You can see we differentiate by proficiency level. What we recommend for 1 to 2.9, starting in second grade, we start to recommend pullout as very strongly, because the 1 to 2.9 kids need that. 3 to 3.5, we have different recommendations. We don't recommend pullout there, or 3.6 and up. And I am sure there are scholars in the world who could argue with every little bit, but in K-12, we have to just take the preponderance of the evidence and we have to move on. I'm also sure that there would be a great argument for looking at their proficiency levels by skill level. But again, you have to have some guidance that is something that people can actually implement in a local school. When we get on up to 4th and 5th grade, you can see again where we are really saying pullout is necessary so that these students get the explicit instruction in language and literacy to ensure that they get those foundational skills. But we do not say that for 3.0 to 3.5 or 3.6 and up. Our guidance for middle school is all on one page, as hard as that was to do. And you can see here what we recommend: intensive English language courses, again, newcomer courses for our 1.0 to 1.9 ELs. Then 2.0 to 2.9 scheduled ESOL classes. And then once they get to 3.0, we go to collaborative push-in or innovative class size model, innovative model, reduced class size. And then 4.0 to 4.9, that's where we really love to still have the scheduled ESOL class if we can get it, and we can go to innovative class size model. So just to recommend, and there's the glossary at the end. So this we will provide with you for you guys, but I just want to show you how we approach it in Cobb, because different districts approach things different ways. And this is our thinking. And it's really easy for a leader to be busy in January and not have time to plan. But, we've really got to have these conversations about what vehicle we need to match. If a kid is a newcomer in grade 4 and 5, I would argue that we need an all-terrain vehicle. We need to come out with pullout. We don't need to be trying to cruise along with, innovative class size model and think that that's really going to meet the needs of the kids. All right, let me go back to my PowerPoint here. All right. Let me share my screen and see PowerPoint. Share. All right, perfect. Now, so let me get into, let me stop there. What questions do you guys have or thoughts, or do you want to poke some holes in that? I mean, I am glad. I do not think that our approach is perfect, but it represents the best thinking and the most practical thinking that I've been able to come up with. So please, questions, challenges, ideas.
I think,
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
go ahead, Kara.
Okay. I was just gonna say I come from a dual language immersion program, and this is very helpful because I come from a dual language immersion model, and this was really helpful because I came in as a new coordinator this year, and I think previously there was no real structure to how they were pooling or pushing in or dual language. So this year I've kind of divided the students by who's studying their target language in the dual immersion, who's on MTSS, and by their access scores, and kind of tried to divide it, but it's nice to see what other people are doing. So I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I think the more we share what we're doing, and it takes a certain degree of vulnerability, and also takes a certain degree of just saying, hey, it's not perfect, but to me, I had to get out there to say, this is our thinking, our recommendations. And my wonderful leaders in Cobb have really supported me in sharing this. And again, with respect for the school leaders ultimately make the decision. They always have to make the decision for their students in their school. And I've got schools that they on paper look like they might be using only, push in, but the way they're doing the push in is they're still getting good results. So what I do say to people is, if you don't take our recommendations, please just be really, really careful that you watch the kids' progress by skill level, reading, writing, speaking, and listening from year to year. Because if you're successful, if you're really moving them towards proficiency and your kids are exiting the program and their content mastery is improving, then, that's the different situation than if your kids are stagnating. So yeah, well, thank you for that. All righty, moving on. So our calendar in Cobb in January, there's a million things going on because, you have all these new kids coming in, but we also do start working on our ESOL improvement plans. And that's where I'm going to share with you guys. And that's why I wanted to do this session on, now you have to start planning, especially if at the high school level, you guys are going to you're going to have your master schedule done by February and start registering kids in late February or March. We've got to talk right now about what you need to do. And that's awkward because you don't have the data for how the kids did this year yet, but of course we don't have Georgia milestones data either. So what are we going to do, and what data do we look at? What data do we need? What data can we use? Well, in Georgia, we have the Georgia College and Career Ready Performance Index, and that has content mastery, closing the gap, English language proficiency progress, and graduation rate. And Georgia DOE people, I know you've heard this from me before. Forgive me, I love you guys so much. But the ELP progress data on CCRPI, if you, I just think it still doesn't, it gives a too rosy picture sometimes. We've got a lot of elementary schools out there with 100%. And we just need to be careful. If you've got a really high 90% or 100% and you're an elementary school, just take it with a small grain of salt. Middle schools and high schools are the ones who have the harder time getting that great score. But but just keep that in mind, that there's 8 performance bands there, and it's the kids who getting the points at the highest level. If they make more than one band of progress, they get the 1.5 points, and that can mask the non-achievement of the kids who are at the lowest. So make sure you look at the percentage of your kids and the number of kids who are in that no progress or that no progress. So we're and I will take a second and talk a little bit more about these, but the CCRPI data just came out in November, I believe, last fall. Most of us were crazy busy in November with end of semester, Thanksgiving, then there was a hot second before Christmas. So you may only be digging into this, but if you're a Georgia school, you want to dig into your CCRPI data. CCRPI has also now back fully live and active, or for the most part, after the pandemic, after a pause for the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's also an appropriate time to look at it. We also need to look at Access for ELL's 2023 data for our growth data. In Georgia, our growth data came out in October, November. I can't remember exactly when, but it is in SLDS. And I strongly suggest to those of you, and if you're at the district level or if you're not, I would ask your district people to give you some calculations for your district, because the Georgia DOE on the ELP growth data, they are being very careful, and God bless you and thank you for that. They're being very careful as the state not to use this as an accountability measure, only to inform instruction. So when you go on the state longitudinal data system, the SLDS, state longitudinal data system, you are going to see the growth by teacher or by grade for a school. you won't see anything for your district. To me, I understand that and I support that, but to me, in my district, I want people to know how they fit in the context. So since Cobb has 112 schools, we get our file, we calculate what our percentage of kids is at low, typical, and high growth for the district, and then by level, high, middle, and elementary, and even by the type of school. In elementary, we have some high density EL schools, middle density, and low density, and we let schools compare themselves to each other. I also really suggest that you take a look at your local school pass-fail data. In high schools, you probably want to focus on the graduation required courses, but everybody, you need to know what teachers are the kids, where are they being successful? Now, you guys, based on, we should never be giving a kid an F based on lack of English proficiency. And that's something that we just should not be doing. But that does happen in some districts, but a lot of times it varies by teacher to teacher. So I just really say you got to look at that data. What content teachers or what courses are your ELs not being successful in, and where are they being successful? And then you've got to know who's ESOL endorsed on your faculty and staff, and you've got to know how they're distributed around the grade levels or across the academic departments. If you are in a high school and you have 105 teachers in your high school and you only have 5 of them who are ESOL endorsed, you got a problem from the get-go. But let's say you've got 25 of them, but 10 of them are in your world language department and they're not teaching any ELs. And then 5 of them are teaching AP and you're not using them to support your high proficiency ELs. And you're only using 10 or 12 of them to help. So you've got to know who they are and what they're teaching. So this is the information you need to gather. You don't really have to gather the CCRPI or the SLDS, but the other two you just have to gather. So now Georgia CCRPI, where is it? Again, you'll get the PowerPoint. This is where it is. And I want to just point out the top screenshot just shows you what data files you can get. This data file gives you the information by school for every school in all of Georgia. And you can see your exact data for your school. And you can also see that in the state context. That is public information. And then at the bottom, it just is a screenshot of when you go to the reports page. And you can see at the bottom of the CCR PI, you can look by content mastery. And there you can look in the elementary school by English, language arts, math, science. And then I don't think elementary school has social studies right now. And then high school and middle school, you can obviously look by all 4. Progress will include progress for English, language arts, math, science, not science, but in English language proficiency. Closing the gaps also for English, for English language arts, math, and well, actually for all content areas, and of course graduation rate if you're a high school. But take some time and look at your data, but also you can get the reports pulled. You can pull down the reports. I do that, and it's really easy to save them and filter them by your county. And you can also look at all schools in the state and all schools in your county. So you can see, how did my school do vis-a-vis the average school in my district or the average schools in the state. So this is some good data to just get familiar with. And I do think in Georgia schools, we need to refamiliarize ourselves and get ourselves back in the habit of looking at the CCRPI. So now, what about the ELP growth model? Well, this is an exciting new thing that the Georgia DOE started last year. I love it so much. It is in the state longitudinal data system, so you do have to log in. If you are an ESOL lead teacher for your school or a coach and you don't have access, please, reach out and within your data, within your district, and follow your district's hierarchy and reach out and see if they can grant you access. We do provide our ESOL lead teachers in Cobb. Now, different districts do it different ways, but in Cobb, we believe that our ESOL lead teachers for each school should have access to be able to see the reports, the growth reports for the EL. So we do have that. and the ESOL admins. But again, everybody has to make their own determination. At least you should be able to see your own students, and then ESOL administrators, if your assistant principal or principal can pull or give you or provide you the ability to look at it with them if that's the only way that it will work. But that's the way you go to it. And I'm just going to show you right now on the next slide what it looks like when you go. And this is just an example of the interactive graph that you see. What the state does for the growth model is the state looks at the previous year access score and the current year access score. So this data represents last year. So it was comparing 2022 to 2023 for every single student. And it compares all the students who have the same score in 2022 with one another. And it figures out, divides the kids who are in the whole state, all the kids, 33%, 33%, 33% into low growth, typical growth, and high growth. And you can see this little school, this is a grade level at one particular school that I have access to. And you can see they had 2 students in low growth. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students in typical growth. They had 1 student kind of just edging over into high growth. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 students in high growth. So these are the students in their school. If I were live in SLDS and I clicked on one of those little balls, it takes me into the student profile in SLDS. I can see their attendance. I can see their assessment data. It's really, really cool. So this came out in the fall, and it is really a neat way to see the growth. Now, the problem is it's last year's growth, and we wish we could do it faster. But of course, you always want data quicker, right? We always want data more quickly. But this is out there now. Now, as I said, the DOE does not provide like averages and stuff like that because they don't feel like that's the right way to use this. And I understand that, but I will show you what we provide in Cobb. So in Cobb, we provide our schools, and I did put on the top of this district generated, so nobody was going to be coming back going, where is this? Where is this? Because it is really cool, I have to say. I've been working really closely with our accountability folks, and we provide this. So for this school, for a school last year, and I think this was an elementary school actually. Yeah, it was. I can tell because of but you can see here that we gave them their from the CCRPI, we gave them their 2022 composite scores by grade. This was because this is a report from last year. We had a little delay in getting this out this year, so these are about to come out for this year, but they came out in January. No, they came out in December last year, and we're getting them out in late January this year. But you can see the ELP growth data, low, typical, and high for their particular school. So this school had 25%, is that right? 25 or 26%, maybe 26% in low growth, 36% in typical, and 36% in high, which is really good, because the state, again, divides the whole state up, 33, 33, 33. And then we give the context for how that school compared to other like Cobb schools. So the example school only had 20, if you look at that chart below, that gives the percentage of EL students with low growth. So the percentage of kids with low growth, the lower the better, because you don't want kids in low growth, right? So this school only had 26% in low growth, whereas the district average of other schools in low growth, elementary, middle, or high school, that was 34%. So they outperformed the district on that for their level. And then you can see what their distribution was. So we do this to provide our DIS schools with some context. Then we also provide our schools with this. And this, we provide them in the spring when access first comes out, but we also provide it again when the growth data comes out, just to remind them of how they did across all of the domains. So we compare expressive and receptive on both of these charts. So we compare speaking and listening, and we compare reading and writing. And I'm just going to pause for a second. And I know are going to have to be quick here, but I'm just going to pause for just a second and say, What do you see in this report? What are the areas of strength to celebrate, and what are the areas that need improvement? What domain are the kids doing the best in?
Well, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like writing. Am I reading this correctly?
So if
No,
you,
not.
so they are the highest number of kids. So let me orient everybody to the graph. Sorry, I just threw everybody into this. Proficiency score is on the left-hand side, and the percent of kids is at the bottom. So for example, the proficiency level in listening, we had 46.8% of kids at this school, 120 out of 124 school kids, almost half of them were at a 5.5 or above in listening. But they were only 4.8% of them were at a 5.5 or above in speaking. And then you can see then 10.5% were at a 5 or above in speak and listening, only 1.6. So you can see that the speaking levels are far lower and distributed at a lower rate across the students, the 124 students, than this listening. And then if you go over to the writing, you can see the writing, there's 1.6% of kids are a 5.5 or 6. But then 13.7% of the kids are a 5.5 to 6, and 11% are a 5.5 to 5.4. So you've got about 25% of your kids reading at a 5.5, but in writing, it's less than 4%. Now, when you get down to the middle, you start to see some variability in the reading scores, and that may be because of kids coming in late. But the writing generally overall is kind of not pacing up with the reading. But then you do have a lot more kids writing at the 3.5 level than you do at the reading. So it's interesting. That's a little more nuanced. But if you were to say, where do we have the most room for improvement? I just kind of tend to come on away with speaking and writing need work. And, Susan was saying that earlier before. She was talking about how if high school kids could improve in writing, they could exit, and they could. So many of them could exit. So this is just data that we are trying to provide to help assisting our schools in identifying their ML needs. And then this is one final thing that, again, we provide this in the spring, and then we provide it again in August. So in May, when access scores come out, everybody gets their spreadsheets, and this spreadsheet, this one right here, there's several of them, but this one has this individual students. Each line is an individual student, and it has 4 years of data. If we have them, if they've tested with us for 4 years, we have 4 years of data, and we have the little line so you can see how they did, if they went up or down. So you can literally glance at a glance and see whether this kid gained proficiency last year or not. And then you can even see if they went up a band based on the DOE's calculation over there in the band growth. So we give them this in May so that schools can see in May how they've done. And then they can also have it again for their current students in August. We provide it the third week in August once rosters are settled. So everybody can see who really needs to be, we need to really focus on this student this year because they had a year of low growth last year. Or like in the case of the kid who's the second kid on this, she's a 4.3, but not the second kid, the third kid. The third kid was a 4.2, 4.8, but then a 4.3 and now a 4. She's got 2 consecutive years of declining proficiency. We need to address that. We need to figure out why that is happening. So that gives folks this data in May when they're planning for finishing up their planning, and also in the fall. So you don't have this data right now. You can look at your growth though by teacher. You can look at it by grade level. You can see, how did my 6th grade do, or how did my 5th grade do with my ELs last year? And then you can ask yourself some questions about, our growth was really good in grades, 3 and 2, 3, and 4, but we really did not have good growth, for our 5th graders. What happened last year when they were and what do we need to do about it? So those are some thoughts there on that. Now, What are you going to do with this data? Again, just as I reminded you, look at CCRPI, look at ALP growth. I'm assuming you have already been looking at your 2023 access data, but look at it in the SLDS growth. And then here's some thoughts about what you might want to ask yourself as you're looking at the data. K-8, again, I've already mentioned that I'm really passionate about knowing where the kids are being successful and where they're not. What courses or grade levels do you see the growth and the success, and which ones do you see the highest pass rates? Again, you have to go and get that grade level data, but that SLDS growth data is there for Georgia schools. Pick 2 to 3 areas where you're being really successful in to celebrate and to, encourage the other folks to learn what this teacher or this grade level is doing, or to try to figure out what is going on in that PLC for that, 4th grade team that is not going on for 3rd grade or whatever. And then think about what other questions you have. And you can do the same for your lower growth or your lower performance or your lower pass rate. So it could be growth. You can also look at your passing grades and things like that. And think about it with delivery model. Are you guys seeing really great growth in K1 and 2, but then growth is really slowing down in 3, 4, and 5? Just look for the patterns. High school, you're going to want to do this based on courses. You're going to want to say, where do we see our highest growth for our MLs? And our highest pass rates, and where do we see the lower growth? Think about the kids who can graduate on time, but who don't end up graduating. What is the barrier? For goodness sake, if we get a kid to be a senior, what can we do to get them across that finish line? And then let's make sure too, to look at that critical move from 9th to 10th grade. The move from 9th to 10th grade is so important. What is the course that prevents them from being promoted from 9th to 10th grade more often, or pick the top one and then figure out what delivery model is being used, what resources are being used there, what do we need to help address that? So try to get to the pain points as well as the celebration points. Let me stop there. I think I've got long enough. I'm close enough to the end. I can stop for a second. What comments do you guys have, or do you have any thoughts on other questions you might ask, or other things you might want to reflect on?
Well, we do have a question from Susan that back to the ELP growth model. Even though the data is old, do you have any thoughts on using it to help distinguish scheduling needs or service models for the students?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The data is last year's data, but it's the best we've got. So if last year's data indicates that this teacher or these teachers, let's say the math department last year knocked it out of the park, when we see with the ELs that they had in their class, it looked like the math department was really helping them out, the ELs that they served. Of course, it's not the language of math. It was just what did math do? What did we see, or what kids in what grade levels? What teachers can we identify as really helping out with them? And of course, we want to look in especially in the courses where they were served, and then what didn't work. If we have ESOL, dedicated scheduled ESOL courses where we see low growth, we need to ask ourselves why. Because if we're using the same teachers to do the same work this year that they did last year, and last year it wasn't successful, then we really need to ask ourselves, as soon as access data comes in this year, or even right now, do we have evidence that they're being successful right now? If we have a situation where, our 9th grade kids who had sheltered English language arts with this particular teacher really had minimal growth, then what do we need to do to address that? Does the teacher need more support? Are the class sizes too big? Does she need more resources, more training? Or, what is the root cause? So I think we really do need to have to use it to ask ourselves some questions. Of course, it's more powerful when you've got a stable faculty from last year to this year, and you haven't made a ton of changes. If you've made a lot of changes this year, then you can say, well, it's hard to know how we should interpret that, because last year we were doing it this way and this year we're doing it that way. So it's not ideal, but it's the best we've got. Great question.
So on another level with that, if you looked at, like, say you had your 9th graders, and you looked at their general overall growth, right? You have those who had high growth, average, and below average. What are your thoughts on potentially creating cohorts within that? If that makes sense, and grouping those that have low growth together and kind of cohorting them throughout their day. Any thoughts in that direction?
I think you'd have to look into who the kids are, and if they're so they're all ninth graders. So you're thinking, okay, we could cohort them, and then we could maybe put them together. Maybe we're only able to have one sheltered Algebra 1 class next year, or maybe we're only going to have one shelter, because you're thinking those kids are going to need the highest level of support. I think that might make some sense to do that, to try to cohort them. I might not cohort them only with other kids who had low growth, but I might try to get them the highest level, the most appropriate and most supportive delivery model. So for example, those kids, I might really try to get into some sheltered content for a class or two until we get them to play where they've got some success. They're experiencing some success. So yeah, I think that has that's very promising. Just we always want to keep in mind that when possible, we do want some higher achieving peers in there with them. So if they're all struggling, not only because of maybe instruction, but also because of some, circumstances that they're all going through, just trying to make sure that there's also some peers in there who can maybe be a little bit more serve as models for them. And that's another real advantage to not always having kids in sheltered instruction all day, because if they have native English speaking peers in classes, then if we can create a collaborative environment and some real interaction there, then they can learn from their native English speaking peers.
Hey, Dr. Webb, this has been wonderful. We have 2 minutes left.
Well, let me scoot-a-loota then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So these were our learning targets for today. And so hopefully you're better equipped to recognize and support quality instruction, understand how the delivery models support quality instruction, and also know what data to use to identify areas of strength and improvement. And then I just want to leave you with this. And again, we'll send this to you, but here are some things that, when you've done all this reflection and all this, don't take on the world, based on what you do with your learning walks and the reports and, your data. What are some successes to build on? What are some areas to improve in? Do we need to change our delivery models? Do we really need to kind of look to see if we can get some math resources for Algebra 1 that are in Spanish to help out our Spanish speakers? I mean, what do we need to do? Have some common sense conversations about those kind of things with folks, and then figure out what your plan is. Don't take on too much, and focus in and do it in an integrated way with what else you're doing. And then design your next moves, your next chess moves. Look at your master schedule. Do we desperately need some sheltered content classes to help kids get graduated? Make sure we know what their needs are. Determine, again, the additional resources. Think about some professional learning and who needs it on your faculty, and work with your leadership to try to make sure that you can get that integrated into your plan for the year. And of course, you've got all kind of stuff that you can do with WIDA, self-paced. The DOE provides stuff. We're providing stuff that's for good professional learning. But then also we will, Donna's going to put the go-to strategies PDF document. For those of you, we have elevation in Cobb. I know quite a few of our larger districts have elevation. I know all of the state of Alabama has elevation, so that's fantastic. But if you're in a district that doesn't have something like elevation, then, the go-to strategies do provide a great resource to put in the hands of content teachers, and especially to work with them in their PLCs, their grade level PLCs, to help them start to differentiate instruction for ELs in their classes. And we've kind of talked as we've gone along, so we don't have time to talk anymore. But if you do have any suggestions or some thoughts, please feel free to message me. And thanks for your participation.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Webb. That was a fantastic presentation. Also, I want to share with everyone, it really was. Let me share just briefly for our next professional learning session. Oh, wait, it just disappeared. Share. There we go. Oh, well, it's not letting me share. Interesting. Okay, well, I will just read it out loud then. I am so sorry. Next time on February 8th, we're going to be offering disciplinary language and literacy communities of practice, and it's geared towards our adult and community strand. When we send out this link to you at the end, there will be a QR code. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to do a short survey and let us know how you liked our session and how we can serve you in the future.
Thanks everybody for participating. And as a reminder, when you get the recording, you are welcome to share it with others in your district. And you're welcome to share it with anyone, because we are all about becoming better together.
Thank you, Dr. Webb.
Thank you so much, Ms. Byers. I appreciate you. You're a great moderator.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.